Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. Why do we bother with security awareness programs when we have so many opportunities to summarize security concepts through limericks? For example, I suspect you write code for the thrills. Open source doesn't pay for your bills. Don't be a complainer, make me a maintainer, and I'll take care of XZ utils. Which means this week we chat with Mark Curphey and Simon Bennetts about investing in the future of open source security tools. In the news segment, CISA chimes in on XZ, PuTTY has a flaw in private keys, a leaky CLI hits more CSPs, and do LLMs dream of exploited heap? And more. Trust me, and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Imperva, a Thales company, is the cybersecurity leader that helps organizations protect critical applications, APIs, and data anywhere, at scale, and with the highest ROI. With an integrated approach combining edge, application security, and data security, Imperva protects companies through all stages of their digital journey. Imperva Threat Research and their global intelligence community enable Imperva to stay ahead of the threat landscape and seamlessly integrate the latest security, privacy, and compliance expertise into their solutions. Start a free trial today at securityweekly.com/Imperva. This is episode 282, recorded April 22nd, 2024. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, John.
Happy spring. The spring is getting me in my allergies, so hopefully I will be able to talk and communicate with you clearly today.
Sneeze away, John, but happy spring indeed. Two quick announcements, some good spring cleaning of our announcements. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSA Conference 2024 full conference pass. RSA Conference will take place May 6th through 9th in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, visit securityweekly.com/RSAC24 and use the code 54USecWeekly. We hope to see you there. And on the evening of Monday, May 6th, W2 Communications and Cyber Risk Alliance are bringing Cyber Tacos back to San Francisco. Get free food and drinks when you mingle with cyber professionals from all over the cyber world as they cyber descend on Cyber RSA. Register security to secure your spot at securityweekly.com/cybertacos. And we've got two guests this week. This is going to be exciting. Simon Bennetts is the Zed Attack Proxy founder and project leader. Prior to making the move into security, he was a developer for 25 years and strongly believes that you cannot build secure web applications without knowing how to attack them. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Mike. How are you doing?
Very good. And we also have someone new to the podcast this time, is Mark Curphey, who is the co-founder and chief marketing officer at Crash Override. Prior to Crash Override, he was the co-founder and CPO/CTO of OpenRaven, a data classification company, founder and CEO of SourceClear, and led the MSDN subscription team at Microsoft. In 2002, he founded the Open Web Application Security Project, OWASP. I think many people will be familiar with, the de facto online community dedicated to improving software security. Hello, Mark.
Hello. I wish I could say happy spring, but I'm in the UK and it's usually pretty grey and raining. So, happy April is what I can say.
Happy April, yes. And grey and rainy seems like the metaphor for, sadly, perhaps application security. And what brings us here today is the funding for application security tools. But perhaps there's a bit of sun in the sky. So set this up a little bit that Crash Override has a new open source fellowship. And it just so happens that Simon, you are now part of this, because when we last talked to you, you were the project, Zed Attack Proxy, was departing OWASP into OpenSSF, but now has a new home. Tell us a little bit how you found this home.
Really, it goes back to, Mark came back to OWASP and joined the board and was very keen to help OWASP projects. And so we started talking then. And unfortunately, OWASP was not keen on the idea of funding projects, unfortunately. That's something I was pushing for and something Mark was definitely pushing for. And I did a a keynote at one of the OWASP conferences saying about all the things I thought were right about OWASP and the things that were wrong about it and what needed to change, and nothing happened there. And Mark was trying to change things from the inside on the board, and he wasn't able to do so either. So it came down that we really decided we needed a new foundation, and the plan was for that to be part of the Linux Foundation. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. We did get some funding, but that funding from myself and Ricardo, one of the other key people working on Zap, that fell through at Christmas. And so obviously knew about, I've been talking to Mark a lot by then, and he basically approached us with this offer, which is an amazing one. Basically means myself and Ricardo can work 4 days out of 5 on Zap, full, do whatever we want, absolute control over the roadmap, everything, and then 1 day a week working on things which actually be useful for both Crash Override and Zap open source tools. So it's just a brilliant opportunity for us as one we grabbed with both hands.
It's interesting because so much of what we're doing, a lot of us sort of go heads down with engineering. Like, we want to build these cool, amazing tools, but the skill set required to actually take that step back and go, okay, where do I get the money for that? Or how do I convince people this has value of what it's doing? And it's not just like, oh, it's open source, people can contribute to it, and that's it. It's good to sort of keep that in mind and like actually find those people when you're able to help really do the funding side of that project.
Absolutely. And that's one thing which I've failed at dismally up until now. I think I kind of originally I really thought that, well, Zap was a small project, it kind of grew very quickly, and I thought if we could produce something really useful for the industry and something useful for companies, then companies would step forward and want to fund the project. And I really believe that. There are a few companies that want to do that, but most of them don't. And we've got some, there's some very big companies out there selling Zap scans online, basing the businesses on top of Zap and not contributing back in any way. And that's surprising to me. That's not what I expected. I thought companies would be, I think Zap produces a huge amount of benefit for the industry, and I would have thought there should be a way for the industry and people who benefit from Zap in the industry to help fund us, and that just hasn't happened, which is a big shame.
And I think that's important. That's where, love to hear, Mark, how did you see Zap? And, Crash Override does have VC funding. And so how did you approach looking at a project like this that is going to be a successful investment while still preserving that sense of community spirit, that sense of openness that Simon was just talking about?
Yeah, so it's worth kind of winding back, right? When OWASP was first started, like, the original idea was just go build sets of guidance and sets of tools for software developers. The reality, looking back, is that the people that generally engaged were security consultants. And I think that's been true for the last 20 or so years. Now, OWASP has grown, obviously, massively since the early days, and has produced through its model, essentially, of like bottoms up, go do whatever you want. Like, it's kind of, I often refer to it as the hippie community, right? It's like, hey, go have at it, go do whatever you want. But it's produced some incredible innovation because you basically don't have there's no friction, there's no rules, right? Go create what you want. And there's been a few, incredibly successful projects, of which Simon's is obviously one of them. As they go through that, growing up, as it were, things change, right? So you kind of wind up with, Simon has 80,000 active users a month, right? They're doing 1 million scans a month. Like, this is scale, right? That if you talk to, commercial startups, they would love to have that sort of scale. If you had a startup that wanted to have 80,000 users a month, like, holy crap, that's awesome. But what had happened with that and a lot of the projects at OWASP is that they basically found themselves getting to that point of maturity where they needed support and they needed resources to fulfill, the size that they had grown at. And they weren't finding the support. Like, they were spending time trying to raise their own money, set up GoFundMe pages, and they were trying to, set up their own GitHubs. And it was kind of like pass the hat around, right? Which is just absolutely ridiculous when you've got 80,000 users there. And I personally also felt somewhat ridiculous when, you've got large amounts of money coming through OWASP. Now, relative large amounts, but it's in the millions, right, coming through every year. And so when a lot of people were very frustrated with that, I ran for the board and decided to get involved again, hoping that I could change it, fundamentally change it, right? And we had this very open, somewhat radical manifesto that was like, OWASP needs to change and all of these things. And was fully prepared, roll up my sleeve, use any relationships I've got, shake people down, bright people, do whatever I could to go raise loads of money, because places like the Linux Foundation have proven that you can go do it. Unfortunately, what happened is that when I joined the board, I quickly realized that there's 6 people on the board, you need 4 people to do anything. And ultimately, it's controlled by consultants. Like, that's the reality of it. And so, I would face these kind of conversations where we don't want big tech to put in loads of money because they'll control what's going to happen. My kind of position back to you was, well, they're going to control it or you're going to control it. The difference is they got loads of money and you don't, right? What's the difference fundamentally, right? Like, everyone has their angle on things. And I'd much rather have people, that are involved in big tech and big industry, because they can have much more influence on things. Like, they have much bigger reach if you've got Google involved versus a small boutique security consultant. But they'll rock up with millions of dollars, and then you can do big things. So the OpenSSF and Linux Foundation, when the OpenSSL Heartbleed things happened, they raised $6 million over a weekend, gave it to the OpenSSL project. Like, they've built SigStore, right? They've funded like online digital signatures for stuff. Alpha Omega project is going out actively finding open source, finding issues and fixing them, right? So they're moving big pies. And I wanted OWASP to be able to do that. And unfortunately, that just wasn't there. And so we tried to we tried to make that work. When that was obvious it wasn't going to work, which frankly was very early on, right? It was like within 60 days, it was obvious we were going to get nothing done. We went and spoke to the Linux Foundation, who I'd spoken to a lot of times, who frankly wanted OWASP to go join them, right? That's a very open thing. They said, come on, we'll figure out how to make it happen. But again, no appetite from the OWASP board to do that. And so we tried to figure out, could we birth this under the Linux Foundation? And what we discovered after 6 months of protracted discussions was that they already have the Open Source Security Foundation over there, and they have a lot of ambition to do things that we also wanted to do. So it was getting to this point of like, well, you could do this, but you couldn't do that. You could do this, but you couldn't do that. And sort of part of the point of going over there was that let's figure out what the right scope is, not what we're allowed to do, right? And part of it was, instead of OWASP being driven by a set of priorities for consultants, let's go have it driven down by a set of priorities from the industry and then work on those things. So when that, and sorry, kind of a longish story, but I think important, like when that didn't work, then I frankly had an obligation to Simon. He followed over, and I think it's just such an important project. And it was just frustrating that there's got to be a way to figure this out. You've got a project here with 80,000 users, 1 million scans a month, used by people to secure critical infrastructure, and you can't raise money for them? Like, what the F? Like, this problem needs to get solved. And so I was reading, it's an English newspaper here called The Times, and there was an article in the Sunday Times. It was about responsible marketing. And basically what they said is responsible marketing is this, it's not like plastering a NASCAR sticker over the side of something. It's saying we're going to do something which is good, and we're going to do it for all the right reasons, but also in all the right way. And kind of by paying it forward, the good will come back to you. But you have to really treat it in the same way. It's like open source. You go do a bunch of work, and hopefully the good will come back to you. And it resonated. And, we're a funded startup, and I went and spoke to my co-founder and other people, and I said, look, we could either do what everyone else does, which is spin up a vulnerability research team. You go find a bunch of salacious vulnerabilities, go to the press about it, get loads of attention, or which is kind of a tried and tested way, right? But it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of mudslinging in some ways, and it just feels like, I get it, but it feels like the industry could do better. Or we can go do a bunch of good, and let's hope it comes back to us in that way. And so that's the decision that we made. And there's no guarantee it's going to work, which is why what I said to Simon is you need to have air cover for a reasonable period of time. It can't be month to month. You've had it for a while. So let's commit to funding you and Ricardo for 2 years fully. And during that 2 years, let's figure out how to make you sustainable. And we can use our connections. We can use help with legal advice. We can help with, hosting and business advice and all of those things. And let's figure out if we can find a model that will help you get sustainable. And I think, we're month 3 into the journey, right, Simon? I think.
I'm curious to see. So we covered the manifesto when it came out and when you're running for board and got on. And I'm sure back then, I talked about this and want to mention again with you're here. A lot of the things that you talked about and the sort of direction you wanted to go and the troubles you're even now describing, I saw over at the Apache Software Foundation, where I'm still a member but not doing a lot. I love what they're doing. I love everything about them. I used to be active in a few projects. But it has that same feel of like, we don't want the big guys to come in and, in their case, tell us what to do. And I think there was some bad blood with Corps previously. But the question here, the interesting point to me is, you mentioned consultants, which it could be a little bit that, but it feels also like there's old guard versus new guard of, Linux Foundation, well, God, is it a decade now? Probably at least. But it's relatively new compared to, OWASP and ASF. Is it partially that there's a new way of thinking about this and we need to get some fresh blood into these organizations? Or is it more of that, like, actually people, what their interests are is different, even if they are new or more modern?
So I think it's nuanced, like many things in life, and I'm not hedging, trying to not give you an answer.
Yeah.
But I think there's 2 primary things. One thing is that a lot of people indirectly make money out of OWASP. So let's take people that go create top 10s, right? Half of the top 10s are, I'll choose it's bullshitarchy, right? I won't use my word, but it's bullshitarchy, right? And I've had people admit it to me. They're sales data sheets, right? They go create these top 10 lists. They have no scrutiny or nothing or what's behind them, but their product magically scans for these top 10 things. So there's an awful lot of self-interest in it not changing, right? Basically. And that's the reality. It's like training and certification. If you have a load of people making money from training and certification, but you are going to give it away for free, why would you support that?
What's in it for me?
This is where people have offered to put money in to build free training and do certification, and the board have said no, they don't want to do it. So that's one piece of it. And then I think the second piece is, yes, there's an old guard or a way of doing it. And I understand it. It's a lovely set of people. It's a lovely way to work with no rules. Do what you want. And if you're spending your own time, it would fundamentally change. But my belief is that unless it changes, it's just going to continue to lose credibility, and die on the vine. And so you could argue, Apache was once held up as the only place for open source and had everything. And I'm not sure that's true today, right? And so, I think there's a lot of parallels there, actually.
An aspect of this that appeals to me too, of what you're doing with Simon, is that looking at OWASP, to pick on them, continue a little bit, to me, it always felt very much like AppSec folks talking to AppSec folks. As opposed to what Simon's doing, making an impact, or, Mark, you were describing the OpenSSF, Linux Foundation making big impacts with SigStore. But here we have Zap helping developers. And Simon, we just recently saw you did a lot of work with improving authentication capabilities of Zap. So it looks like there's already, is that something that is, we could draw that line to that investment from Crash Override, that type of help? Or what do you see in the next 1 to 2 years that you could show, hey, not only was there responsible marketing, but we are producing something, to produce something valuable for the community?
Oh, absolutely. For many years, Mozilla supported me for many years, about 8 years or something, but it was only part-time. Then a couple of startups funded me as a way of getting their name out there. So I was able to work on Zap full-time for 3 years. But now with Ricardo on board, we've doubled the number of people working on Zap. And with people often say, well, how does Zap compare with Burp Suite? Well, one thing is Burp Suite has got over 120 people working full-time on it. There's what we, we're good, but we're not 60 ex-engineers, let's be honest here. So we can do a lot, and 2 of us can do a great deal. But if we could actually get more funding, then we could do even more. So there's loads of things we can do, loads of things we are able to do now, but there's so much more we would be able to do if we could actually work out a way of encouraging the industry to fund us in a proper way. All these companies who build products on top of Zap, all the companies that use Zap internally to find these things and don't spend huge sums of money on commercial tools, some of which I've been told privately don't work as well as Zap. It's the potential. There's massive potential, and people say Zap's been around for a long time. Well, this stuff's hard, and I like hard problems, but we need more people, and we've done a great deal. We're doing even more now. We've got proper funding, but if we can get more funding, we could do so much more.
And part of this, Mark, too, part of the funding that you're doing with this fellowship is that your criteria is pretty simple. And to be clear, too, Zap remains Simon's project, right? This isn't a crash override project at all.
A team project. It's not
tell
mine.
us about the criteria. Yeah.
No, I mean, so again, it was very essential we did the right thing. This is not some thinly disguised, program. It's responsible marketing. So from a perspective of Simon, they own 100% of the code. They own 100% of the roadmap. It's nothing. We don't use it in our product at all. There's no side product of using it. As we got to know the guys, we're like, oh, that's awesome. Maybe you could do this. But that was not a motivation at all. We're not like one of these companies building scanning stuff or anything like that. So from Simon's perspective, the criteria is you got to operate nonprofit. We are not an incubator. We are not, helping you go figure out how to sustain yourself while you figure out a commercial company. You have to operate and always want to be a nonprofit. That's number one. Secondly, you've got to want to figure out a sustainable model, right? It's not just here's 2 years of air cover, and at the end of it, it's like this is here to give you 2 years and our help to help you become financially sustainable. And then the third part is you own everything. It's not that. I don't know if that answers the question. I think there were three things, and I forgot my last point. But
no, that absolutely answers the question. I want to tie it back to one of John's comments too, sort of that a little bit of that old guard versus new guard, new way of thinking of things, because here too you're looking at this as helping Simon, leave the nest, as it were, be self-sustainable. And we've seen Red Hat, and even in your blog post, you mentioned Red Hat as an open source. That's one sustainable model. What are you looking at, or what do you see as a future here for successful ways for projects like this to sustain themselves? Because it's very different from an executils that's a dependency that people consume versus a tool that honestly has been, as you guys mentioned, incorporated into commercial products.
Yeah, well, I'll answer for. I think Simon's going to have an interesting perspective as well. But I think there's two fundamental things here, right? One is it has to work for us, and this isn't just a bunch of money, and we're Google, and I can throw some money over the fence. Ultimately, we've got to get something back, but we need to do it in the right way. So that's not NASCARing and advertising and all that. There are some subtle links that come back, but Simon and I have an agreement, it's what's appropriate for an open source project, and hopefully we're balancing that appropriate piece. With respect to helping Simon become sustainable, the difference between executils and Simon is that those are projects that other people rely on or use to build their products. What's happening with Zap is there are people using it to make money off them, right? And that's not even a subtle, but it's a really important difference. We know of one company that's making several $100 million of money every year, and they're offering to contribute, in the tens of thousands back, really in return for a logo on the website. That's insane. When if you look at the cost of a developer that they would have to put on this if they didn't do it, just one, that would fund so much more. And so it's just short-sightedness. We had a case recently where someone said, I can't afford any money. And we looked at it and they just raised $3 million of venture capital. Well, if you can't use Zap, you're going to have to go and hire a developer. So, it just doesn't make sense. And so there's a couple of ways that it could happen. One of which I think Simon, hats off to Simon. They want to do the right thing, not the Steve Jobs, let's go nuclear on it, which is let's see first. They've already tried. Can you get donations? It doesn't work, right? Like that boat's floated right at this point. So the second one then is, can we build a support model, kind of the Red Hat one? And can we, offer support to users, hopefully, and consumers, but potentially also to some of these companies that are embedding stuff in. And then if that doesn't work, the only other model that we really know about is to GPL it. And basically that forces the people that are making money out of it online to have to pay up. But that has implications for some of the users as well, because if you're in some large companies, GPL may be banned. And so that's it's the third option, which would have an effect on the users, on the general user base. But if there is no other alternative, I think it's fair to say, Simon, that's the one that may have to be used, right? And you're not there yet, but it's kind of looking like it may be that way, right?
It is, yeah. So, I mean, we have had a couple of companies sign support contracts, which is great. So, I've been talking to a lot of the smaller companies using Zap and building service on top of Zap, and we want to support them. And we understand, if they've got not much money, Zap is an ideal option here. And really, when it comes down to it, if you want to, provide DAS scanning as a service, you can create your own DAS scanner. It'll cost you 10 million, something like that. It's that kind of investment you've got to make. You can rebadge a commercial one, then they eat your lunch, or you go open source. And there's only one really maintained, fully open source DAS scanner out there, and that's Zap. I've been tracking these things for a long time. So I kind of thought that would be an incentive for these companies to actually support us. And I said the smaller companies, they seem to be much more willing, the larger companies not. And, either they're not talking to me at all, or they're talking to me about co-marketing agreements. So I think the GPL option is getting closer and closer.
One of the interesting things about this, though, is like I've been in a room pitching VCs with whatever security startup I have, and frequently as they like the idea, the conversation continues. And as they start diving a little bit deeper, they bring someone into the room who is able to dive a little bit deeper on what is your tech, what is your, this thing that you think is worth millions of dollars. The question I get almost every time is, oh, you're just wrapping this open source project. Why would we give you funding? So there's an aspect there which, it's funny, I was going to go down the path of like you versus the cloud providers and how do you license this? But as I think about that, it becomes that challenge of like a little bit of empathy, but like how do you get, maybe it's not the startup that you have to convince to give the funding, but the people with the deeper pockets behind that are providing that to realize that, hey, there's a reason that you guys need to not build this yourself, but actually help contribute to the overall market.
But we know of companies who've got lots of VC money because they're just wrapping Zap. Yeah. I think they've done stories about how they're adding value and all these things, but a lot of it's the web front end. So I'm very, they claim to be adding, but they're adding this much on top of, 14 years of work or whatever. So it's, very disingenuous.
Yeah, I mean, we know through our network of a lot of the offenders, and I'm using the word carefully, offenders. But and we don't want to call them out. But there's, I'll kind of call. Well, look, there's one massive tech company who produces operating systems in clouds, right? Who has been evaluating the thing against commercial offerings, and aren't paying. And their kind of take was, well, if it was GPL, we'll probably go pay for the commercial version. And you're thinking to yourself, hold on a second, like, why wouldn't you support this, even if it was 10% of what you're going to pay for the commercial version? And so it's just a lot of it is head scratching, right? Of how of why, and yeah, hopefully we can all figure it out together. But if we can't, I don't know. We'll continue with all these problems, right?
And it feels so short-sighted because you mentioned OpenSSL a while ago, and Heartbleed was that aspect where, oops, maybe we should have been investing because OpenSSL is supporting 30 different kind of obscure architectures that nobody's really using. It had the feeling of hobby project where it was running critical infrastructure. Here, Simon's pointing out, Zap is the premier way to go if you need a open source scanner. And I've worked on a DAST myself. I know the complexity. your 10 million estimate, I don't think is too far off, to be honest. So maybe I'm not sure. This is a bit perhaps more ranty than in trying to turn it into a question for you too. But if we talk about like the future of other tools, maybe this starting with Simon, are there other projects that you would love to see peers of yours be supported like this? Basically, what are the community tools that can help make those continue to make those impacts to AppSec like Zap has been doing?
I'm not going to call any particular ones out, but I think open source is a huge source of benefit, particularly in security, and it's something that it's a great way of people getting into the industry. I was a completely unknown developer. I wouldn't have actually. I did start trying to get jobs in AppSec once I'd started Zap, and a lot of companies were saying, "Well, no, not really interested." I got turned down for jobs and companies who were competitors now or whatever. So there's. Open source is a great way to get involved in the industry, and some people say it's difficult to get into the industry. If you're a developer, work on a tool like Zap. If you get into the Zap core team, I can get you job offers. No problem with that, and a lot of people have done that. But I think there's just a huge number of tools, and if we lose that, and if it's I think there's that potential of going, well, if your tool gets too big, you have to go commercial, you have to go VC funded. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense anymore.
If you look at a bunch of the other OWASP flagship projects, Defect Dojo is now commercial, right? Like he's built, Matt Tesoro has built a company around that. And, and it's, if there aren't these models that you can't not build a commercial company around it, like that's the route to go, or give up, right? Fundamentally, or continue to be, the heroes of the internet until you can collapse no more, right? Which as we know doesn't work, right? We've seen that too many times.
No, it doesn't. And to Simon's point, I wanted to reinforce that. When we talked with you last time, I think it was around 6 months ago, one of the things that stood out to me the most is you've made this contribution to AppSec by being a developer. You are not a AppSec person out of the gate. And it's almost like maybe we do need to come full circle and engage with developers. So we don't have CISA in 2024 releasing announcements about SQL injection is bad. Let's fix SQL injection. That seems AppSec has definitely failed somewhere along the line. Mark, there's maybe one last question for you in the sense of you have this open source fellowship. You're looking, there's a kind of a 2-year time frame to help foster Zap into its own. What are some of the I think I've asked this already, but maybe if there's someone else who's looking to come out and say, hey, Mark, we need help, how should they approach you? Or what are the good ways that they can just present here their case to Crash Override or to this fellowship?
Yeah. Well, we've got to make it work. And then if we can make this model work, we can just go rinse and repeat, right? But not only rinse and repeat at Crash Override, I can help other companies do the same thing. Because I think, we have the potential here to make it a scalable model, but we have to make it work. Like, I think that's the first thing. And, we have a limited amount of money and have a limited amount of risk to go do it. So we want to make sure that Simon's got the appropriate resources to give everything the best shot. So I think that's kind of there. Now, that said, I'm always open to helping people. And there's, a lot of the people that wrote the open letter to OWASP, which unfortunately hasn't been acted on. I'm constantly in touch with trying to help them, and I'm always happy to help people in any way I can. So if people are looking to do it, more than happy to help. And of course, if people have ideas and want to get involved with trying to figure out what the model is, then all ears and as well. And the more help. It's not. I'm not going to be able to solve the problem. It's a collective problem. It's kind of like the environment. Like we've all got to get together, and then everyone has to do their bit as well. But it's a collective thing, and it's a complicated thing to go solve. Right?
Indeed, and I'm going to throw in. There's another blog post that I don't think we'll have time to get into, but you wrote about security bubbles. But you're talking about the models of OWASP, OpenSSF, SSP as well, and in fact they are addressing different goals. They're different ways of trying to solve this. So it does. I think for the audience, I wanted to share that too, because this isn't where you've come and said, I know the one true way. You're just finding those gaps and seeing that Zap needed a home. let's make this happen. Let's be supportive. And I think that's where I wanted to honestly say thank you on behalf of our listeners, at least for us, about being so active in AppSec for 2 decades plus.
Oh, no. Look, I mean, OWASP is, trying to choose my words, but like one of the things I'm most proud of, and also one, frankly, at the moment, one of the things I'm a little disappointed with, right? That it hasn't ended up the way I wanted it to, but I hope it will. But also I'm at peace in with it. I once shared an office with Ward Cunningham at Microsoft, who was the inventor of the wiki and one of the patterns and practices guys. And Ward, gave some sage advice, but one of those things is, when communities change and they're no longer the way you want them, like, don't keep on fighting it. Like, try and change it the way you want, but like, ultimately it's controlled by the community and the big will of everything. And I think, there's room and for a community like OWASP that is predominantly consultants, doing things largely that make themselves better, right? Which is kind of what a lot of it is, and in a way that they want to do it. That's great. You have OSSF, centrally governed, large tech predominantly, solving problems that they care about. What is missing is, right now, I think, is a community that's driven largely by practitioners, so by CISOs, saying, look, these are our biggest AppSec problems. Go figure out, and trying to say, instead of the tail wagging the dog, like, these are the things that we need solutions for. And let's rally the industry around trying to solve those. So, examples of that are that instead of the OAuth top 10, which is largely derived from scanning data, right, which is the reality, like, and so, you wind up with circular causation of like, the more that you find, the more popular it is, the better consultants are trained at finding it. Like, there's a reason why that thing hasn't changed in 10 years. Like, let's just be honest. But then what are the most important things for industry? And an example of that is that there is no clear definition of what a good DevSecOps pipeline is and how it should be configured. So, typically good advice. I mean, if you configure GitHub badly, like, you lose the signing of the Git history. Well, that should be well known, right, around how that is. So here's how to configure Git so that you always have a history of that. Where should certain tools be run and how should they be run in order to give you, certain things? We've got Soul Server build attestation. We've got lots of great technologies. But if we define those reference architectures, those are important for people to be able to go and look at and implement. But we'll also drive like, hey, consultants, like, go figure out how to check against these things, right? Versus how to go scan for more of X, which is up here. So hopefully what SSP will do, and we're just finalizing the board, which is 10 CISOs right now. I don't have a governance play in it. That would be hypocritical. I'm helping facilitate it, but I do not have a governance role in it. What that will do is figure out, how to set those priorities in a CISO-driven top 10, and then how to fund and do projects that are those priorities. So hopefully that'll be, will be interesting. It's taking a long time to get it right, but...
Well, congratulations again for being in a room with 10 CISOs and trying to work out priorities with a group like that.
Yeah.
One last thing, we are also constrained ourselves just on time, but we do like to have fun near the end of all of our interviews. And I'll start with you, Mark. We always ask our guests to help us fill in a blank for us. AppSec is most likely to what? How would you
repeat
that
the same mistakes that it's done for the last 20 years?
You'll get no argument from me. Simon, anything more pessimistic or optimistic than that?
I'm going pessimistic, I'm afraid, and it's in keeping with this talk. AppSec is going to keep on ripping off open source projects.
Ooh. You got 2 British guys here who glass is half empty with everything. So it's a loaded question, wasn't it?
Well, we know you're enjoying a fresh spring London day, so I can see that's clearly what put you in the mood for this. But thank you, Simon. That is a message that we want to amplify, and we do wish you luck on this. Mark as well. Wish you luck with Crash Override and the Open Source Fellowship. So I just want to say thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Always great talking to you.
Always a pleasure. I also want to thank John for helping me out with questions, especially if my connection goes a little bit wonky. But in any case, we survived, and I wanted to just say thank you once again to our listeners. We're going to take a quick break now and return with news of the week.